All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into an automotive legend, trying to solve a real mystery. What is the absolute rarest version of the Mercedes-Benz W124? So let's just jump right into the big question here, the central paradox of the W124. I mean, on one hand, you've got this indestructible taxi, right? The kind of car famous for hitting 1,000,000 kilometers without breaking a sweat. But on the other hand, it's the foundation for a supercar-beating monster that's rarer than a Ferrari. How can one car possibly be both of those things? Well, it all comes down to this one simple, powerful phrase that Mercedes lived by. Engineered like no other car in the world. And they weren't kidding. The foundation for this car's split personality was just an obsessive, almost crazy commitment to quality. They tested these things for millions of kilometers in the most brutal places you can imagine. Think scorching deserts, icy mountain roads, you name it. They were literally built to last forever. And boy, did that engineering pay off. Just look at that number, over 2.5 million of them. Between 1984 and 1995, Mercedes just cranked these things out. It was a huge success, and honestly, it set a benchmark for build quality that, you could argue, they've been chasing ever since. Okay, so that brings us to the big question, right? With millions and millions of these cars out there, which ones are the ones that are basically impossible to find? It's easy to think they're all just common old sedans, but trust me, that is definitely not the case. Let's start digging. All right, first up, the usual suspects. To figure out what's rare, we gotta know what's common. And for the W124, that means the good old four-door sedan. This is the car that built that legendary, indestructible reputation. But it wasn't just sedans. Mercedes had a few other tricks up their sleeve. You had the super classy pillarless coupe, gorgeous car, the incredibly useful wagon, or estate, and yeah, even a stretched-out limousine version. But look, to find the really rare stuff, we gotta dig a little deeper. Okay, here we go, our first real contender for the crown, the A124 Cabriolet. The convertible. I mean, just look at it. A proper four-seat, open-top cruiser. A true factory-built rarity. Now, this was not your average W14. This was a pure statement of luxury, and it had a price tag to match. We're talking sky high. Think about it. In today's money, you'd be looking at over 150 grand. So yeah, not exactly a car for everyone, which naturally meant they didn't make a whole lot of them. And here's the proof in the pudding. That number right there, 33,952. That's it. That's how many cabriolets they made for the entire planet. When you compare that to the 2.5 million total W124s, wow, that's a drop in the ocean. And if you were in the US, your chances of seeing one were even slimmer. Just over 6,000 of them made it stateside. So the key takeaway here is this. If you're talking strictly about a factory body style, the Cabriolet is a major contender for the rarest. But our story is far from over. So you might be thinking, okay, the Cabriolet is the one, but hold on. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. This is the plot twist. We have to look past just body styles and into a secret project, a collaboration that created a true wolf in sheep's clothing. So picture this. It's the late 80s, BMW has the M5, and Mercedes needs an answer. They've got this absolute monster of an engine, the 5.0-liter V8 from the SL Roadster. Perfect, right? Well, one tiny problem. It didn't fit. The V8 was just too wide for the W124's engine bay. The project was so complicated, Mercedes realized they couldn't do it alone. So who do you call? Well, their own engineers were totally slammed designing the new S-Class. The chassis needed a massive overhaul. And just across town in Stuttgart, you have Porsche, who happened to be in a bit of a financial pinch and had some spare factory space. It was a perfect, almost fated partnership. And what came next was one of the craziest production stories you'll ever hear. And when I say crazy, I mean it. Look at this process. It took 18 days to build one car. The body would start at Mercedes, then get shipped over to Porsche to have the chassis widened and strengthened. Then it went back to Mercedes for paint, then back to Porsche again to get that V8 crammed in and finished. Finally, back to Mercedes for one last check. It was totally inefficient, completely bonkers, but my God, the car it produced was a masterpiece. Yeah, with a build process like that, you're not exactly going to be cranking them out by the thousands. In the end, just over 10,000 of the 500e and the later E500 were ever built. And get this, there was an even rarer limited version with less than 1,000 made. We're talking less than a third of the Cabriolet production. now we're getting into some seriously rare territory. Okay, a rare factory car is one thing. A rare factory collaboration is another. But what if I told you there's something else out there? Something that exists completely outside the factory system. This, my friends, is where we meet the ultimate unicorn. The legend, the Hammer. You have to remember, back in these days, AMG wasn't part of Mercedes. They were this independent shop of mad scientists. You'd bring them your W124 and they would turn it into an absolute monster. And their most famous, most unhinged creation was a car so powerful, so insane, that it earned the perfect nickname. I mean, look at these stats. 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. A top speed of 190 miles an hour. In the 1980s. This wasn't just a fast sedan, this was a 4-door supercar. It was faster than a Lamborghini Countach, faster than a Ferrari Testarossa. And it could do it all with you and 3 of your friends sitting in total luxury. Just incredible. And here it is, the number that ends the argument. This is the absolute peak of W124 rarity. Because every single Hammer was a custom, hand-built job that cost an absolute fortune. The best estimate we have is that only around 29 were ever made. 29 in the entire world. So, where does that leave us? After all that, which W124 is actually the rarest of the rare? Well, as you've probably figured out, the answer, it's a little complicated. Let's just lay it all out. The numbers really do speak for themselves. You've got the Cabriolet, a factory body style, at just under $34,000. Then the factory special, the Porsche-built 500e, way down at about $10,500. Then that crazy limited edition E500 at under $1,000, and then the Hammer at around $29,000. So here's the final verdict, and it really depends on how you ask the question. If you want the rarest mainstream body style, no question, it's the A124 Cabriolet. If you want the rarest car that Mercedes officially built, even with a partner, it's the Porsche-built 500e, especially that limited version. But if you want the single, undisputed, rarest W124 of them all, period, well, that has to be the legendary AMG Hammer. And really, that's what's so amazing about this whole story. Each one of these cars is a totally different chapter, but they're all part of the same book. The big takeaway here is just how unbelievably versatile that W124 platform was. The exact same DNA that made a taxi reliable enough to drive to the moon and back was also the perfect starting point for some of the most exclusive, most legendary performance cars ever. So it leaves you with a fun question to think about, right? If you had the chance, which one would you hunt for? The super rare Porsche-built factory special or the ultimate performance monster, the mythical Hammer? Let me know what you think. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.